McLaren continue their F1 dominance with their 200th win as we head into F1 summer break. Welcome to the Grid Talk podcast, and today we are reviewing the Hungarian Grand Prix in Budapest. I'm your host, Tom Horrox, and today I am joined by Owain Medford.
Hello.
Sports journalist Tyagi.
Hey.
And also at the Grid Talk, George Howson.
Evening.
Be sure to follow us on our social media at Grid Talk UK, wherever you find the @ symbol. We're literally everywhere. And if you are feeling extra generous, please consider supporting us on Patreon as well for exclusive access and behind the scenes content like our Beyond the Grid podcast and sometimes some unfiltered outtakes as well. But after an interesting race, expectedly not a lot of overtaking given it's the Hungarian Grand Prix, but we're going to give everyone the chance to talk about the eventual winners, McLaren. So we're going to start off with you, Owain. And I mentioned at the start there, it's McLaren's 200th win since 1966 Monaco Grand Prix. But put aside the race drama for now, how significant is that for you, for the only team besides Ferrari to now be on 200 wins? And what kind of statement is that to the rest of the grid?
Well, I mean, they are back. I mean, they've been back for a while, let's be honest. It's, over a year now. But, I think it shows clearly that Zak Brown knows how to turn that team around. They put the right people in the right places. They've made the investments that they need to. I remember 10 years ago when it was abysmal, what McLaren were going through, nowhere close to being race winners, let alone getting a 1-2 and being kind of the class of the field beyond, a little bit of a blip in qualifying that sort of seems to be, out of pace that Ferrari can't maintain in the race for any decent period of time. With that, sort of the McLarens seem to have sort of everything in the right place as well. I think when it came to even the battle, I mean, yes, it hurt Lando. I think, maybe a little bit going into turn one, not wanting to take out your teammate. That is very clearly rule number one. They don't want to fall into the pitfalls of numerous other teams who have had two competitive drivers who don't want to yield or anything like that, but they navigate that super well, clearly, and it means that I think they've got two very mature drivers, but they got to remember that the team result is the most important part, and they've taken away a full complement of points here. And I think it's important to note, I don't know how true the stat is now, but McLaren has a higher hit rate than Ferrari, or at least did a few years ago, with the number of races that they've won compared to the number of races that they'd entered. And I think that's partially maybe because of the way that they go about things. It's not so dramatic at McLaren a lot of the time. They just keep cleanly executing. And that is why, obviously Ferrari is way ahead in some ways, but, you can kind of see McLaren catching up, if Ferrari don't get that rule cycle sorted for 2026. So it's really, it's a sort of, I think, shows that they are probably over time have been the second best team on the grid, and maybe wouldn't have been if Ferrari hadn't, entered obviously right from the very start.
Second race, not from the absolute start. They weren't in Silverstone 1950. But no, you know how much I love a stat. And if I hadn't have run out of time, I was going to look that up at the hit rate. So I'm glad that I'm not the only person sad enough to think of those kind of stats as well. So thank you for bringing that to the fore. But yeah, and I agree. And you've got to think about Ferrari's dominance. It's really only two spells of dominance in their history, really. So it's always been a bit of a team that underperforms, and it surprises me that they are so far ahead in that list. I thought McLaren would be quite near, but obviously not. But moving on to the race itself, George, you could talk about the race winner, race of two halves for Lando Norris. Up until the last lap, I was completely convinced he was going to be nowhere near that win. So talk us through the race and how he won, despite exiting turn two in fourth place. Good old Lando.
Yeah, Lando Norris's starts once again struck, unfortunately, for him. But, he got past Alonso again pretty quickly after that and, just kind of got his head down. But he was stuck behind George Russell and he basically gambled. Everybody else was doing a two-stop. Everybody was saying this was going to be a two-stop race. It was a bit cooler today, so it opened up the opportunity to try a one-stop. And Lando, it was far from a fringe, crazy strategy. A lot of the grid actually tried the one-stop and made it work. The likes of Alonso, Bortoleto, Hamilton, and quite a few others actually did try it further down the grid as well. And everybody was doing the two stops. He thought, right, I'm just going to do the one stop. It's the only way I'm going to win. It might not work out. If it doesn't work out, I finish fourth. If it works out, I could get a podium or better. And he just hung it out there. As soon as the guys ahead of him stopped for their second stop, Lando just picked up the pace and he just didn't put a wheel wrong. Everybody talks about Lando being a bottle job, caving under the pressure. He's not as cool. He's not as consistent as Piastri. Today, he absolutely showed that he can win a world championship because he had everything going against him. He didn't qualify particularly well. His first few stints, the race did not go well. His start definitely didn't go well either. But he came through and won. And with Piastri dive bombing it, doing some fantastic moves to try and get that, Lando Norris maybe of last season would have caved, would have made a mistake, made contact with him, run wide. None of that. He absolutely measured it perfectly. He did the minimum, in a sense, to win that race. He did what Alain Prost, the guy that's been likened so much to Oscar Piastri, did so much during his career. And it's a huge victory for him. We'll go on to Charles Leclerc. We'll mention about Charles Leclerc, obviously, but he did lead during the early stages of this race. Last stint for him did not go well. His place just fell off a cliff. We can hypothesize about that. We don't know the official reason for that. But McLaren, again, another 1-2 victory. 200 wins in Formula One to their name. 4 1-2 victories in a row. They're going to break all kinds of records. They're already breaking a lot of their records already. So a huge, huge win for Lando Norris. Piastri does have the advantage in the championship still. It's 9 points. It's not a big advantage, but Lando again with the momentum. And people might say it's boring that McLaren are winning all the time. But at the end of the day, we've got a fantastic battle between two teammates. Everybody harkens back to the likes of Senna, Prost back in the day. This is on that kind of level in terms of two drivers absolutely on their A game and just swapping these wins throughout the season. And I'm loving it.
Yeah, props to McLaren. They're doing this absolutely the correct way. They're doing it even better than Mercedes did at the start of the turbo hybrid era. There's no way would Mercedes have let that race play out the way it did. They would have had both drivers on the same strategy and then tried to strategize the second driver into second place. They would absolutely not have let them fight the way that they let them fight today. So props off to McLaren there. Fantastic job. So we're going to round out the McLaren discussion, Dev, with get you a chance to get in on the action. Oscar Piastri still leads the championship. He's going to feel very disappointed with the way it went today. So how did he lose this race in the end? What was your opinion of that?
I think Lando Norris was just the better driver today. I mean, it's as simple as that. We always talk about the cars having the better race pace on most Sundays, but I think it's also about tire management. And as George pointed out so rightly, I think this is exactly what Lando Norris demonstrated at a very high level of performance. We always talk of Sir Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso as two veterans who look after their tires pretty well. And just look at the way Lando Norris performed today. And I think it was a very gutsy move. He just said that if I have to win, then it just has to be one stop for me. And it was always going to be a one stopper the way he was progressing. And I think after the disaster at Canada, at Montreal, the way he has fought back, I mean, his results speak for him, even though he is one victory short in his teammate Oscar Piastri, but his results ever since Canada is over. He won at Austria, he won at Great Britain, his first ever win at Silverstone, of course, and then after a valiant second at Spa-Francorchamps, entering the summer break by stepping onto the top step of the podium. I think psychologically he is on the better scale in terms of the comparison between the two McLaren drivers. And all in all, a mega victory for McLaren, who sort of bounced back with a vengeance. It's almost like it was kind of a vengeance-laden drive after having missed out on acing the qualifying on Saturday, which surprisingly Charles Gordon, I was happy for him at that point in time. But then who can ever stop from the papaya color getting diminished on most Sundays? That's never going to happen the way it's going. And it's good.
Yeah, no, fair point on that. I think that as well as you mentioned about Lando and the racecraft there at the start, I think any other person alongside him there, he's not backing out as much as he is in that turn one. That's what then led to the problems. And then just at the end there, Piastri, the same as in Austria, just seemed to be going a little bit too far on the attack for my liking, and I'm sure for McLaren's liking. Obviously, I want them to race, but that to me seemed was a little bit on the edge. But props to him again, kept out of the back of Lando, although it couldn't have been any closer than it was. That was even closer than it was in Austria. So, but we're going to talk about something other than McLaren's now, because we're 10 minutes into the podcast and all we've been is a bit of a McLaren loving. I'm fine with that, but I'm sure other people are not. So let's move on to talk about the Mercedes team next, Owain, and you've got Russell enjoying a podium with Kimi Antonelli in 10th. Russell was very unhappy with Leclerc's driving, and he lost out to Lando's strategy. But was the podium deserved for him? And despite the quiet race for Kimi, is this now him starting to get to grips with that car, given how little overtaking we saw in the field?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously Russell did a great job, obviously passing Lando off the start, which I think obviously unsettled Lando and put him into into Alonso. But from that point onwards, he did a good job in the opening stint. Obviously, he did get undercut at that first pit stop. And I think, to be honest with you, with the pace of the McLaren, you would kind of expect that. I mean, Mercedes seem to have come on sort of leaps and bounds, and they do have Hungary, it seems, kind of well figured out in that way. But his pace from that point onwards was really good. I think he measured the pace quite well, despite the sort of gaps that opened up. I don't think that he had it sort of all his own way. I think Russell's sort of ability to catch Leclerc was more down to Leclerc not having the ability to drive at the kind of potential that he wanted to. That last stint for Leclerc, as we've said, is abysmal. You watch it, he's almost going backwards by the end. But and seriously held up Russell in the few laps that they were together. But yeah, from Russell, I think it's a great position to start with, and obviously he's converted that into a podium for the team, where you might not necessarily have expected one. And then when it comes to Antonelli, obviously it's not a great start from where he started. I think it's down at 15th on the grid, and it was, I don't know whether he sort of pitted into traffic or anything like that, but that first pit stop wasn't necessarily amazing. But I think he's done quite well, in that last stint, to really manage the tyres to actually make it to the end, and take that last point, which I know is not a lot, but I think that's a sign of good things to come. And at least, they're still getting results out of him. And obviously it's building confidence. It's his first year in the car, and it's been a bit rocky, particularly compared to an experienced teammate. So from that perspective, I think he's done a great job, and hopefully this is a move in the right direction going into the summer break. And maybe it's almost come a bit too soon, with how he's been driving, at least in this race.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we saw a lot of drivers. Anyone who was in traffic wasn't really overtaking. So I think the 15th place start wasn't representative of his pace either. So I think we've definitely seen a turning point. And it's very odd that you put an upgrade on the car, then you win in Canada, then you take it off, and because you just, ever since the upgrade's gone on the car, Antonelli hasn't been able to drive it. So it's very strange that now they take it off and all of a sudden he can drive it again. Very weird. But he definitely seems to be stemming the flow anyway. One driver that definitely has not stemmed the flow, George, is Lewis Hamilton. He stunned the F1 world after qualifying with his statements about being no good anymore and Ferrari should replace him. His race didn't really improve a lot either. I mean, starting on the hard tyres seemed a bit of an odd choice anyway. But Leclerc, on the other hand, was flying, and the first part of the race was brilliant. The second half of the race fell away, and some very questionable weaving at the end there. Tell us about the Ferrari race and why did something with so much promise end up with so little yield at the end?
Well, sadly, Ferrari got a bit previous when it comes to this at Hungary, don't they? I think they did something similar in 2022. They looked really good, and then just in the race, just absolutely fell off. This was a bit different, though. I mean, Charles Leclerc pulled off an incredible pole position lap yesterday, and there might be a reason for that. I'll get into why as we go kind of through this, but yeah, an unbelievable one-lap pace, and to beat the McLarens. It looked as though McLaren were going to get the front row of the grid and be relatively comfortable in that regard for qualifying, but Leclerc just pulled it out of the bag. First stint looked great, he was doing pretty solid lap times and everything. Second stint, again, he was in the net lead of the race at that point. And the third stint just fell off a cliff, and he basically said that there was, I forget the term they're using, clipping or something like that he wasn't happy with. They were thinking that it was maybe something to do with the engine. George Russell thinks that it was something to do with tyre pressures and having to get the ride height of the car up, because of course we know that Ferrari had literally been chucked out of China before for having their car too low. They've got a new floor which seemed to work wonders for them in Spa, seemed to work pretty well here in the hands of Leclerc for most of this race. But yeah, ended up down in fourth place. Leclerc was driving angry. He was as red as his Ferrari at that point, doing everything he could to keep Russell behind. The first defense was borderline, to be generous. The second defense was way over the line. Dangerous driving, rightfully got a 5-second penalty, didn't change his finishing position, still in fourth place. But Hamilton, it's hard seeing and hearing Hamilton saying what he was saying. He was so downbeat. He goes into this summer break on an absolute low. It's horrible to hear him like this, saying that he's not good enough, that he's the problem, that they need to replace him. Obviously, they're not going to do that. Obviously, they're going to stick with him. It's a terrible weekend for him. It was really poor in qualifying. It's not that much better in the race. Yeah, not the best strategy, starting on the hards and then going to the mediums. He was harassing Hadjar in the latter stages to try and get past, but he couldn't quite manage it. very much a weekend to forget. He goes into the summer break needing a real reset and a recharge, and Leclerc's also going to be angry for different reasons, but at least Leclerc got some good points. Hamilton is, yeah, I can understand why he's not feeling great, but it's you don't want to hear your lead driver saying things like that.
No, absolutely. And I have to defend Hamilton a little bit here in that he was only 1/10 slower than Leclerc in Q1. And that's just, was it Q2? Q2, sorry. And then that was what got him kicked out. Or was it Q1 he got kicked out? I can't remember now. It's so long ago. But either way, he was only a 10th off Leclerc. And then that's where the cutoff was. He just seems to be on the wrong side of the luck at the moment, which is not great. But hopefully a bit of luck will come his way in the second half of the season. And he'll at least bag a podium for his first year going into 2026 and then try and have a bit of a reset. But we're going to talk about Aston Martin next, who have definitely had a bit of a reset. They appear to have some pace finally. They put an upgrade on the car, which seemed to put them at the back of the field in Spa, but now they've got it working. Alonso repeating his Hungary 2021 antics by proving once again how good he is at driving slowly. And Stroll backing him up in 7th is just what Aston needed going into the summer break and for their 2026 hopes. How do you rate their weekend, and where did that pace come from?
I think Aston Martin had a very remarkable weekend, and ever since they had the upgrades going for them from the start of the Belgian Grand Prix, there was a sudden lift in performance. And today, Fernando Alonso actually proving why he's such a legend. Of course, there's been a bit of a romance with the Hungaroring. He won his first ever race as a much younger driver in his very early days here back in 2003, a track he considerably loves. A track where during his former teammate Ocon's mega maiden win, Alonso defended valiantly against Hamilton. So he has that kind of racing prowess here. Interestingly, if you were to compare his performances with Lance Stroll at the beginning of the season with the first 3 races, Alonso DNF'd in the opening 2 rounds, and I think Lance Stroll managed a valiant 6th in the season opener. Ever since Spain, Fernando Alonso's luck, aided by consistent performances, has turned for the better. And interestingly, both drivers now are on equal set of points, 26, with Alonso actually being on P11 and Lance Stroll being on P12. So as they head into the summer break, they will have the confidence of having revived their position in comparison to how they were at the end of the first 5 races. Of course, with Alonso not really packing a punch. But I think something was working for him, as we saw on a scintillating Saturday at the end of qualifying. And he was really putting his car right out there, right? He was at one stage during the dying moments of Q3, even on 3rd, only to then seeing himself being usurped by the other ballsy McLarens. So as far as Fernando Alonso can put in those daunting performances with Lance Stroll not doing too bad himself, I think his job sorted for Aston Martin, who I think will now feel very confident in their fight against Williams, I would say, on the constructors. But all in all, a solid weekend. The upgrades are working. Alonso is firing, and I think things are moving in the right direction for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Aston Martin now up to P6 in the championship, just 18 points behind Williams, who we will be talking about a bit later on. But Owain, you won the bum fight before the session. You get to talk about Sauber. Now, ironically, despite their big haul of points, they have actually dropped 1 place in the Constructors' Championship, but at least they've opened up the gap to Racing Bulls. How bad was Hulk today? And contrasting, how amazing was Bortoleto? The floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, I mean, Hulkenberg, yeah, it wasn't great. He was sort of, I don't know, it was a bit, you know what, I'm just going to come out and say it. I don't actually think it was as clear cut. I need to see it again because it didn't look clear on the replay that I saw. But obviously he incurred a penalty and he was not doing great to begin with where he started, obviously starting P18 on the grid. It's not, obviously it's not generally recommended to pick up a 5-second penalty essentially as you start the race at P18, at P18 on the grid going into going forwards. Obviously he started on the soft, so, it sort of ruined his race a little bit. And I don't think the softs were a good tyre to start on anyway, but they did it. So from that point onwards, I think it was going to be a long afternoon. I think the temperatures were cooler, but they would have needed to be, almost frozen over for the softs to work. He did 5 laps on them, and his pace, unfortunately, was good in the opening stint of each tyre, but really dropped off. It just didn't seem to be able to get things working today. He's done really well considering that to get himself up to 13th, despite being on a 2-stop with, like I say, sort of less than stellar pace. And by comparison, I think the 1-stop by Bortoleto was just astounding. He's just done such a good job, and he had such good pace in that last in that last stint compared to the others around him, that it sort of built the gap that he needed, and sort of he can meter it down maybe as the tyres wore down, because he sort of stopped late, and I think that's probably where he's got this made. He's stopping a bit later than everyone else or some of the others on the two stop. I don't think the two stop was quite as good today, despite sort of Piastri or Leclerc trying. But yeah, I think it's obviously sort of bad from Hulkenberg and great from Bortoleto, and I think he's honestly going to give him the world of confidence, because sort of back-to-back points is really hard to do. Obviously, when you're in a team that is not floundering around. That's a bit mean to them, to be honest with you, but really in a midfield battle, and it seems like this is real. We've been to a number of tracks, and Sauber seem to have got it right. Whatever they're doing to that car, it's working. And I hope it's not short-lived. I hope that this doesn't sort of fizzle out by the end of the season or before the end of the season. But they seem to kind of have everything in place for this rule set eventually, and they're doing, I think, a decent job with it.
So a 5-star review there for Sauber from Owain, and we would appreciate it if there could be some more 5-star reviews for us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate those. So please, if you have any of those, if you want to leave us a review, if you haven't done already, please do so. It takes a couple of seconds, and it all helps us in our metrics and helps us climb the charts. And if you're listening and not currently subscribed to the channel as well, please help us out with a like and subscribe as well. So on to Racing Balls next then. And we're starting off with Hadjar George, a very painful incident with some gravel hitting his hand. And that meant that he still managed to hold the Ollie Behrman position of 11th. But an 8th place for Liam Lawson sees him beating Max Verstappen on the road in the final standings there. So not great for the second team, given how well everyone else scored around them. But how happy is Lawson going to be with that?
He's going to have a real beaming smile after that. He's going to absolutely love that, isn't he? Just after the torture he went through in them 2 races at the start of the season for Red Bull Race. And you know what? He fell off for so long, did Lawson. He took such a hit mentally after that happened. It took a long time to recover, but he seems to be scoring points semi-regularly now, which for an RB driver is kind of what you expect. So yeah, he did a good job. I mean, the Racing Bulls overall this weekend, they had good pace. They were 9th and 10th in qualifying. They were just behind Max Verstappen, a long way ahead of Yuki Tsunoda. But yeah, that incident with Hadjar, I believe that gravel trap at that corner, turn 12, is new. I don't remember that being there before, or at least it might have changed anyway. But he seems to be catching a lot of drivers out, a lot of drivers running through that. And yeah, big bit of gravel hitting his finger. That'd kill. That is a nasty one, that. And it might well be the finger he uses normally to shift as well, so it could be even worse because of that. But yeah, Hadjar didn't do too bad of a job to end up in P11, with all that considering, really. Lawson in P8, very solid. Yeah, but the problem is, like you said, that a lot of the lower midfield teams did score really well. Obviously, Aston Martin scored really well. Sauber scored really well. So they've all gained big points on them. So it's going to take a bit for Racing Bulls to really kind of recover from that, unfortunately, for them. But taking the result as it is, 3 seconds ahead of Max Verstappen, I think Lawson definitely would have took that before the race started today.
Yeah, I think you and I actually said that in our preview. This could be a good race for the midfield teams to pick up the points. So there we go. It shows we do know what we're talking about from time to time anyway.
Very occasionally, yeah.
Very occasionally. Moving on then to Red Bull then, Dev. And Yuki was the most screen time he got was when he was standing behind Piastri in the interviews, and he dropped his water bottle, making everyone look at him. Starting from the pit lane, any idea why? He didn't seem like he was too far back. And then Max Verstappen's strategy seemed doomed from the start. And despite some great on-track passes, he ends up losing a place overall. What happened to Red Bull today?
Yeah, I think they just did not have the kind of performance to excel in this kind of a track. And I think after Saturday's, very disconcerting qualifying result, probably they would have felt already having to contend with too much of pressure on track for Sunday. And Max Verstappen did pull off a few ballsy moves, especially in the opening part of the Grand Prix. But after that, it really wasn't a race in which they were contending strongly for points. Although I did think at one point in time that given his racing prowess and all the experience that he's had, he would have finished in top 5, but then it wasn't to be. And Yuki Tsunoda, of course, ever since he's joined Red Bull, which was from the start of the Japanese Grand Prix, he really hasn't been the kind of driver who is perhaps seemingly contesting with the kind of freedom or I think his happiness index perhaps at Red Bull is now been replaced by this pressure to perform index, for the lack of a better expression. I mean, even though we saw at Bahrain and Miami, he performed decently well to an extent of P9 and P10 respectively. his past 6 to 7 races haven't really culminated in any points. So I think he's driving from the standpoint of securing his future instead of adding on to his level of performances in this current season. And as far as Max Verstappen is concerned, his disconsolation stems more from the fact that Red Bull do not have enough punches to pull anymore in this season than Christian Horner leaving the team. So I think it's more or less now a performance which you could compare to be in the realm of like a damage minimization mode. And I don't think that with the kind of performance upgrades that the likes of Aston Martin, of course, the informed McLarens are putting on, for sure, that the likes of Verstappen can be expected to perform at a level that we've become accustomed to in all these years. That's my
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. But at least after this race, Gianpiero Lambiase's ears are not going to be bleeding quite so much as they were at this race last year when Max Verstappen gave a tirade of abuse over the radio. So a slightly less passionate result for Red Bull there. So moving on to Williams then, Owain, and they knew there would be nowhere. They said there'd be nowhere, and they were nowhere. Apart from some unnecessary team orders, I didn't really have anything to note from them. Did I miss anything? Was there some amazing overtakes in there from science that I completely didn't see?
I mean, if you miss them, I miss them as well. As you know, I was just having a look back just to see if there was any time in this rule set that Williams had excelled or done anything close to it astounding at Hungary, and they just haven't. I think this is one of those tracks that they know is one of their bogey tracks. It's kind of like Mercedes in Singapore, really. You know, back in the early turbo hybrid era, they I mean, it's all corners, and that doesn't seem to be this philosophy that this car works best. It's, just to explain, if you don't know already, it's designed to clearly be as aero efficient as possible. And this is a track that rewards having a hell of a lot of downforce. Unfortunately for them, that means that does put them in a poor situation, and they've had a bad qualifying and then a bad race as well. I think generally that Williams would have needed a lot more rain either in qualifying or the race to get any kind of result out of this, as it just doesn't seem that they have. Well, I think they're fine with it. It clearly seems part of the plan that they, won't be sort of optimizing for this. That seems the very James Vowles way to go racing with this kind of thing. They I'm assuming they would love to fix it in 2026, but there is no point spending the energy or the time on 2025. And as a result, I think 14th and 15th is kind of the best that they could have hoped for, and it's approaching the best results they've had in this kind of rule set. I think, yeah, that's it for Williams. It's unfortunate, but I think it's part of the plan.
Well, if Ron Dennis were there, he would describe it as a suboptimal track layout which contributed to our poor underperformance or something along those lines. So
it's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Okay, so we have the disappointment now to talk about Haas, George. I know you weren't particularly happy about talking about it because there was nothing there, but Ollie Behrman at least breaks his run of 11th place finishes. Unfortunately, a DNF, and the only DNF was the unwanted replacement. Ocon, anonymous as well. Haas have looked stronger in recent races since they brought an upgrade to that team, but they don't seem sharp enough to land the big points that their rivals are. Are they now just going to be looking over their shoulder at Alpine for the rest of the season, or is there still hope?
There's hope. I think there is pace in that car. They showed that at the sprint in Belgium, but yeah, this is a real terrible one. I mean, if Williams was suboptimal, this was suboptimal. This was like below that. This was terrible for Haas. Yeah, Behrman breaks his 11th place streak, but not in the way he would have wanted to, unfortunately. Damage on his own tray, sending him out. I mean, incredible reliability from the cars again. I mean, around a difficult track like Hungary, to have one mechanical retirement in the whole race, I think that is absolutely astounding, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, Haas just look really bad. They're in 9th place. They kind of look like maybe getting a cut adrift of the likes of Aston and RB now, unfortunately for them. They've got a good cushion to Alpine below them. Alpine had a shocker of a weekend as well. But, Alpine, they have this incredible result in them somewhere, at least in the hands of Gasly anyway. You can get 7th places, 8th places. And, right now, with the way Haas are going, it's going to be difficult because I don't think many teams are really going to upgrade much for the rest of the season. There's not going to be many of them. Haas definitely aren't going to be one of them. All their eggs will be in the 2026 basket. So unless they can find a track that really suits their car, and Hungary obviously wasn't it could be a long rest of the season. And it's not out of the realms of possibility to finish bottom of the constructors again, with how solid they were at the start of the season would be a crying shame. It really would be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, they said start of the previous season that if Haas are not 10th, then they're doing better than they should be because they are the smallest team. So the fact that we have a works team behind them, I suppose, is one thing that they can be happy with. But we're going to talk about that team now, Dev, and I will get cancelled if I don't mention Alpine. So here we go. Colapinto does outqualify Gasly and does finish ahead of him in the race, but an embarrassing slide to the back was bad even for them. How did that happen? And are we going to see any more driver swaps? That's kind of the only thing Alpine are normally good for news for.
I unfortunately did not, follow that particular incident very closely, but I mean, it was almost like a racing weekend to forget. And with Pierre Gasly so far back in points, not scoring any, neither of the Alpine drivers scoring even a solitary point. Of course, it was never going to be possible, given how exceptionally fast the other cars were. But I think Hungary just proves a point that I mean, if you're effectively a back marker team and you haven't really gotten any significant upgrades and you haven't been showing any kind of performance, and it's not going to be easy. It's one of the fastest tracks on the calendar. Gasly, on the whole, has been, if you talk about the season collectively, he has been doing the entirety of point scoring. All the 20 points that Alpine have scored thus far have happened because of Pierre Gasly's prowess. He got some good results. I think just recently at Great Britain, he got a fighting P6. At Spa, he got 10 points. But other than that, he needs a lot of support from the other drivers. And of course, they have been jostling for positions. As far as the perspective about whether we're going to see another driver being drafted into that other Alpine team, I don't think they would want too many changes. Unless, of course, if nothing's going in for them, then would they want to have Jack Doohan in for a couple of races towards the end? Would that even make any sense? I'm not sure. But I think what remains to be seen is how far Gasly can single-handedly pull this tractor of a car, for the lack of better expression.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a difficult second half of the season for them, and they're very much going to be hoping the 2026 regulation reset will spring them back into life. They'll certainly have a more competitive engine, so that's one thing to look forward to. So the last point of interest then for the day is the driver of the day. So Bortoleto was Grid Talk's driver of the day. So I'll ask you, Owain, who was your driver of the day?
I gave it to Bortoleto. I thought he started from relatively far back on the grid. Well, obviously from the heady heights of seventh for Sauber, given their form in the early part of the season. But nonetheless, he did a great job. Like I say, he managed, he had pretty frenetic pace on that one stop, and he expanded the gaps when he needed to, even in front of his manager, I believe. So I couldn't work under those conditions. But yeah, he did a great job, and obviously he's taken home a big haul of points despite obviously the movement in the championship.
Yeah, strong performance, definitely. George, any advances on that?
Yeah, I went for Gabby as well. I mean, he was absolutely superb to see him get sixth place in that car when, Hulkenberg was struggling so much through this race. It was not a good one for his teammate at all. And, him looking like, the seasoned veteran, he's in his first season of Formula One and had so little experience of driving a Formula One car before this season. I think probably the first time he drove the Sauber or drove any Formula One car was during pre-season testing or somewhere near that anyway. So to see him do that, to see him learn so quickly after being, 2 years ago, he won the Formula 3 championship at this track, I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, or at least round here anyway. So to see him progress that quickly and look so composed, didn't put a wheel wrong, not in the fastest car by any means, to get sixth place in that Sauber, absolutely superb.
Yeah, no, brilliant performance all round, as I've already said. Dev, any other candidates beyond Gabby Water?
I think Bortoleto was, of course, exceptional today, but I would give it to Fernando Alonso. I mean, I'm biased to the elder statesman of Formula One. To see him collect his best ever finish for the season thus far, I think it was incredible as a fan. And to see him, scoring the best position for Aston Martin as a team on the whole was nice. So for me, it's Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, I had Alonso as well as the only Formula One driver older than me. There's still a chance that I can be in Formula one day. It'll happen. So that is our show. I'm just going to give my panelists a chance to plug anything once again. So, Owain, where can people go to find out more about you?
The only place you'll find out more about me is on our Grid Talk social channels. If you keep up to date with my score in particular on the prediction challenge, which is honestly the only thing I care about at this point. There's me desperately pleading that Leclerc does get overtaken by Russell just to take points off my fellow hosts, to bring me 4 whole useful points and close the gap to you, Tom. You can find that at Grid Talk UK on all of the social media platforms. That's run every week by Louis. Very very kindly for us, and he does a great job, meaning that we obviously, it's just a little challenge that we all do each week or each race, sorry, to predict who knows Formula One best, I guess. Which, after my abysmal performance in the Grid Talk, I need sort of saving from. So yeah, that's at Grid Talk UK on all of the social media platforms with the app.
You need to start a podcast, Owain. Okay, George, where can people go to find out more about you?
Well, they can head over to the f4chronicle.com website or onto Microsoft channel MSN as well. We are Motorsport Reports as well on the other Microsoft channels as well. And of course, Formula Reports on most of the social medias, including YouTube, Facebook, X formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, probably a lot of others that I'm forgetting about too, as well as Substack as well. Do go check us out on all of those if you want to see more from me. And yeah, the prediction leagues, but not the highest scoring league this weekend, but it's tight at the top. 1 point between the top three. It's really heating up as we head into the summer break. So yeah, stay tuned for who's going to be the champion.
I think I've dropped away from that battle now. I haven't checked the scores, but I don't think I did that well this week.
You didn't, no.
No. I should have had faith in my boy Lando. But there we go. But I had to do my predictions on. I had to do them quickly, and I hadn't had a chance to think about it. So I just went opposite you to try and get more points.
Excuses.
Anyway, moving swiftly on. Okay, Dev, where can people go to find out more about you?
I haven't been doing a lot of Formula One writing of late, but I've been writing extensively on cricket. So if you're interested in some content on the West Indies and the Indian cricket team, patriotism be damned, you can find my work on sportstiger.com. Cliched as it may sound, but that's it.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone for listening as well. Remember, Grid Talk is available on YouTube as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Cast. Just search for Formula One Grid Talk for our back catalogue of shows with previews, reactions, and race results. Thank you very much to Jared Bradley and Holly Eagle for supporting us on Patreon. And if you would like to join them to get all the behind-the-scenes extras that they get, please look us up on Patreon for the exclusive content. Make sure you subscribe so you're the first person to know when we go live. And we will continue to make great content through the summer break. So keep listening to Grid Talk. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.